Thanks, guys. I doubt any of the folks here need an introduction, but we'll do it anyway. We'll have them introduce themselves. Matt, you want to start?
I'm Matt Murphy. I manage the iFund for Kleiner Perkins. We announced that we doubled it from $200 million back in February. We have 14 companies so far.
I'm Gaurav with Sequoia Capital. I work with a large number of mobile and wireless companies.
Rich Wong, Self Partners, work with companies like GetJar and Amazon.
Okay, thanks guys. So before coming to this, I had the luxury to pull a lot of our developers and ask them what questions they'd like to ask of these gentlemen. So I've got a lot of colorful ones I'll leave to the end. But I'll start with, I guess, from a big picture perspective, probably Gaurav. I'll start with you, you're sitting in the middle, so it's an easy target. So the big question is, are we in a bubble? An app bubble?
No, I think, and who knows, but around Sequoia, the view is that it's entirely possible we're going to see a world with much larger number of apps than we have today. We've talked about numbers like 1 million or 5 million within the foreseeable future on a variety of platforms, ranging from the 10-foot experience to small screens as well as tablets. And of course, what gets lost often here is the apps on Facebook and other social platforms.
So we're not in a bubble yet?
No, I think it's a long ways from that. It's a very, very early innings. Another way to put it is, I feel we're in 1995 on certain platforms, 96 on others, and even 93 on platforms like television.
Rich, what do you think? Sorry.
Well, I would say it sort of depends on what the aspirations of these businesses are. I mean, I think there's maybe a large number of great studio businesses or lifestyle businesses, perhaps. I think it's still early to see what are the big transformative plays, sort of in this space. I think there's a strong hypothesis some of the gaming companies or vacation companies could very well be the first wave of that, but it's not yet proven. And so I think, as one looks at how much capital one invests or how much capital one takes on as an entrepreneur, it's worth thinking about what's the realistic mark and the value of that business, and not, in some cases, getting overcapitalized. Because not everyone's going to be a $500 million, $1 billion business.
I don't think it's we're in a bubble at all. That implies is there a cap on ambition or creativity, and no, and I think we're going to continue to see people increasingly attempt to put something out there and see if it can be the next big thing. And that's the beauty of these more open ecosystems. And we're also kind of in the first wave here with iPhone and Android on the phone device, and now as we see the tablets kick in, and as Garg was mentioning, now these things are cross-platform between TV, tablet, and phone. It allows a whole different segmentation. So we're still very early.
Good. Matt, I'll go next to you. I think in 2004 or 2005, I was at the Churchill Club, and John Doerr said that there won't be any new platform anytime soon. The new Samsung is Samsung, and the new Google is Google. So, do you agree?
I'll have to remind him of that. No, I mean, that's funny. But, as soon as we knew that the iPhone was coming out, and John immediately jumped on it. He said, "This is the next big platform," and he was totally right. I think a lot of us on this panel, and maybe out here as well, have been pushing the rope in mobile for a lot of years. And what we needed was just something where any developer could reach any consumer, and any consumer could get whatever they wanted at reasonable prices and very little friction. So, it changed the game in ways that is amazing to see even in 2 years. And I think it's only accelerated, as Larry said, way beyond what we ever expected when we launched the iPhone.
So, Rich, do you agree that the iPhone is the big platform, or is it Facebook, Google, or something yet to be discovered or announced by Redmond?
I think the platforms that are relevant for the next 3 to 4 years are starting to become pretty well known, and we're only in their early stage of acceleration. So, exactly to Matt's point, obviously the iPhone certainly surprised me. I'll say that in terms of how impactful it was, in terms of dominating in some cases both the advertising economy as well as the mobile economy at large over the past couple of years. But obviously, I think Android is in its infancy right now, and it's accelerating rapidly. It will have all the normal things that you can poke at: fragmentation issues, security, payment ecosystem. But I think those challenges will be solved, and frankly, some of those ideas will be good companies in of themselves. So I think, Facebook, Android, iPhone, those are the places to bet right now. And I know as was discussed yesterday, I think it's really quite stunning to see Nokia and BlackBerry recede in relevance as quickly as it's happened. Just a short time ago, you really think of those guys as the kingmakers, and it's stunning too that they are so little relevant.
What about Microsoft?
I think that's going to be interesting to watch. I think they're pouring like $400 million of developer marketing and marketing dollars into the platform, and honestly, it feels later to me than they should have been. Perhaps it's too late. I think Android in terms of its acceleration is pretty stunning in terms of the types of handsets and the diversity of hardware they're putting out. So perhaps that makes it a very, very tough slog for Windows.
That's a different answer from the one you gave on television.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You are on television, by the way.
You are on television now, right?
In a minute, you think.
So Windows is it's going to be difficult.
So, Gaurav, when you look at a company to invest, do you look at whether it's a cross-platform strategy, or would you prefer a more vertically integrated experience into a single platform?
Well, it entirely depends on the company. So perhaps the best way to answer that is through example. We're investors in a company called Inkling, which does college textbooks on the iPad. And it's not the traditional rendering that you would expect where, you scan every page and you put it onto the iPad platform. It's a from-scratch custom development where the content of the textbook is truly translated into a much fancier experience. So an anatomy textbook, you can spin the heart, for example, right? Now, something like that is extremely platform-specific. And then there are other things that we're investors in, like Dropbox, that have a slightly different experience on all the different platforms they're on, from Mac OS to Windows to Android to iPhone and iPad. All of those experiences are slightly different, but it's the same. They're trying to tailor it to what the user expects from that particular platform. So it just depends on what you're trying to do.
What about you, Matt?
Well, I think, if you're a mobile developer, then, you're probably thinking, where's the volume, which right now is iPhone and Android. And around these tablets, everyone's kind of saying, okay, well, how big are these going to be, and does my application have relevance there? But what we're seeing now is just mainly, for the most part, people who develop mobile applications put it on the iPad and using it as a larger screen. But I think we haven't seen enough of the innovation of what the power of the inherent device is. So one of the things is that you really need to say, what's the experience that I'm trying to deliver on this type of device? And there'll be some differences between, say, an Android phone and an iPhone, but a massive difference between those and a tablet. And I think that was what Garg was alluding to. We have that big screen and it can rotate a heart, or those kind of things. Or even in games, with what Zynga's done on Farmville on the Facebook versus on the mobile device and soon on the iPad, there's just a lot of differences. So to maximize your revenue potential and be most competitive, you really need to think platform specific, mainly between tablet and phone, a little bit of nuance between, say, different phone devices, Android and iPhone.
I just add a point. I think so I totally agree on the importance of the heterogeneity. I think one thing that struck me when using the iPad, but honestly, it's sort of an obvious realization in retrospect, but it's like how powerful just the mobile web is from a bookmarking perspective. And then, to me, the fact that you have the bookmark as an icon on the home screen, in many ways, to me, it behaves very similarly to how I might otherwise use what is otherwise defined as an application. So I think, we tend to, those of us that live in this mobile ghetto, tend to talk a lot about sort of the specific device ties, the lower level integrations, the lower level API sets, and how you want to have a very specific client for a very specific phone. But I always come back to thinking of how powerful just a raw website, a mobile website still is, if it is discovered in the right way, like I think the iPad has done a very nice job.
So let me follow up with a question to you, Rich. So, we're seeing from our developers that if they develop an app, they think of the iPhone and the Android as an experience, and they think of the iPad of a different experience. So kind of like the lean forward or the lean back experience. So do you see a distinction between a developer that is going to develop what is a typical mobile app targeting the fast-moving individual, or different from a developer that's looking at kind of the living room experience on the iPad or a soon-to-be announced?
Yeah, I think you do have at least I think it's so early, it's hard to say exactly how it's going to shape up. I think, back to a point that Garg made a moment ago, I think it just totally depends on what specific services you're trying to deliver. So, for example, if you are wanting to deliver business applications or enterprise services, as much as nobody in Silicon Valley wants to talk about Windows Mobile very much, it's still a somewhat relevant part of the ecosystem. I think Android's going to become an increasingly relevant part of the ecosystem. So I think, frankly, I'd focus on those platforms before something like an iPad. But if you're delivering more about the media or entertainment experience, I think, obviously the fabric or the substrate of something like an iPad or an iPhone is substantially better. So I think it just really depends on what specific application you're trying to deliver for what thing.
I want to follow up on one thing Rich said. So you said mobile websites, the power of those. But I think right now, if you take a look at even what's being done with, say, magazines, right? You've got companies like Zinio who are delivering a magazine that looks like a PDF and you kind of flip through it. And then you've got the Time magazine, what they created, which Apple's advertising on the iPad right now, totally interactive. And that's kind of changing the experience of reading the magazine. Very different than something you get on the newsstand, whereas the Zinio model is very similar. And I haven't seen that delivered to the website yet. Now, we all know that we're hoping that HTML5 will make websites look like apps. But where we are today, hasn't been as much innovation on the website side. And I don't think that's the way users are really consuming new content.
On the enterprise side, to add a little bit to what Rich said and perhaps push back a little, there are a large number of enterprises that are buying thousands of iPads for their employees for custom apps. And it's not just in the obvious places like logistics. It's really been surprising. And I have no idea what kind of apps are being developed. It's a little early, but I do feel there will be perhaps not as much of a visible explosion like on the consumer side, but I think it will be fairly relevant.
You guys invested in airstrips,
yeah, right.
Or a lot of field workers, insurance agents are going to be walking around with iPads out in the field. When you go to Hertz in the future, it's going to be an iPad versus, that old symbol thing. A lot of potential.
Yeah, a lot of my companies sold, I can't remember the name of the customer, but the company was buying 10,000 iPads for their employees. It was completely a white-collar type of application.
So, Richard, question to you. You've done, a lot. You've been in mobile for a while, and very good success. Is there a shift in investing in what I would call platform services like ad networks or services to developers versus investment in specific content like social games or lifestyle, media, entertainment, news? Any shift you see, or you're still looking at a broad picture?
I wouldn't say that there's a dramatic shift, and I think, the theory of the case, right, is oftentimes if you can find some platform that becomes the center of an ecosystem, it both becomes strategic over time, and that in theory should be a perhaps more valuable business than just something that's a vertical use case. Oftentimes there's many counterexamples that prove the contrary to that. So I think we all search for those, as well as we all search for the booyahs of the world and the others that are the quote hot app as well. So I think the honest truth is, at least I'll speak for myself, I just try to search for more things that I really think are going to work in mobile. And I think the honest truth is that there's still a lot of minefields and fragmentation challenges. So that list is a very short list every calendar year. And you sort through all these different conferences and events, and just probably less than 3 to 5 companies I think can really be interesting and big. And then I just do my best to try to beat these guys to the first base to meet those companies. So, but I wouldn't say there's a dramatic shift.
Gaurav?